Hi guys, happy Friday. Just hitting the buttons here on my camera. Hope you guys are doing really well and that you're having a creative week. We have a really fun class today. It's actually one of my favorite techniques. It involves that bringing together herringbone stitch to create a kind of like a launching point for a bunch of strands. So it's kind of like creating your own, like earring bar, like a finding, but with seed beads. And so anytime you can make what is kind of like a finding with seed beads, I'm pretty excited because it's a possibility opening idea, and you can turn this idea into earrings. I've done that a lot where like you take and make the same little start that we're going to do for this bracelet and then just do fringe on it. So lots of places you can take this design once you've got the basics down. And a cool trick that we're going to share in class today, that for the bracelet, bringing it all together, there's a fun little kind of how-to there that I'm excited to share with you guys that brings all the strands back together. And so what I've got here on the mat is a bunch of beautiful supplies. So the crystal that I'm using it's completely up to you what colors and what what palette you would like to go with. I was really drawn to this blue turquoise, and this is a size 11 Czech glass seed bead. And then I put it with, so the first thing I did was I grabbed these, and I felt like this color was just, there was some synchronicity there. And then I grabbed these because they were, still along that theme with the Tanzanite, the Amethyst, and then the Topaz for some warmth. And, I could have mixed them up and just, I don't know, I just thought that it looked neat with all in one flowing strand, because when you bring it together, you've got all this color and sparkle. And I mixed up AB finishes with non-AB, so you can see the different sparks and flash going on there. So, but this is kind of one of those sky's the limits designs that you can truly make your own by switching up your colors and using whatever crystals you'd like. Another thing I did was I made a kind of pattern where I used the seed beads to space them, and I mixed up 4mm and 6mm beads. So play with that and see what you like. There's really no limitations. You can stagger large beads so that they can sit next to each other. It's another idea to play with. I just made them all the same, which made getting the height, the height the same at this end easier. But again, so many things you can do. So in class today, what we'll do is we'll grab some seed beads first, and we'll build this little starting section right here, which is just a really cute, easy herringbone. And then I'm going to answer a question that I got emailed from Pat. If you're there, I got your email, and I'm going to answer that question about the thread. And then we'll build the strands, and then we'll bring them together. And of course, here at the ends, I've got some findings. Let me show you what those are really quick. And I'll also show you, the usual thread and other stuff that we've got going. So there are these really cool wire guardians, and that's what I've used on the end of the herringbone part, just to attach the finding. It's a really secure way to bring like your chain and your clasp together. So, and that's something you guys have seen us, we use these a lot in this way. So that's what I'll be doing with those. And then I just used a lobster claw, some of these handy, and some jump rings, which I pulled those out of one of my findings packs. You can get jump rings from your stash or from the findings wall at Michael's has lots of different ones. So whichever look you like. And then of course for stitching, I'm going to be using our Wildfire 0.006. It's got the right, structure. It's a heavyweight thread. And then some size 12 beading needles. And then let's see, any tools. The tools today are pretty limited. You just need some chain nose pliers to open and close your jump rings, and also to do our trick where we flatten the thread, which helps you get your needle threaded. And you'll need some scissors to cut your thread. Okay, and so for how much thread to cut? You kind of need a lot, but you can add thread. So don't worry too much about cutting an uncomfortable length of thread for you. I do tend to kind of go a little longer than I normally would on other designs that I've taught, because it is kind of cool if you can complete this whole thing with, as close to one strand as possible. But generally adding new thread is so easy because this gives you lots of places to weave in, And so you can also reinforce your strands if you feel like you want to at the end. So as far as what I'm going to cut for length today for the demo, I'm going to go pretty short, but maybe 65, 70, or even as much as 90 inches, depending on how many strands you want to do. And I'll talk about how many strands when we get started. But let me get my seed beads. I've already got some out on my mat. And again, these are size 11 Czech. And this is the blue turquoise color, if you like that one. It's one of my favorites too. So grab that one. And I'm going to cut probably 60 inches or so, assuming I'm not going to be able to. I have another jump ahead sample that has the strands made, because there's the stringing part of that takes a while. So I have that worked ahead. But I would cut maybe as much as 90 inches to do the whole thing if I was going to give that a go. And so this is a flat chain nose, square nose. If you have chain nose or square nose, either is fine. But all I'm doing here is just very gently flattening the end of my thread. And I found that makes it a lot easier to get through your needle. And you got that flattened. And so it should just go right through. And if you're having any trouble with that, just bring the thread just kind of like, so it's sticking out between your thumb and your finger, and then just very gently try to bring the needle to it. And that helps a lot getting it threaded. And then fold that down about 7 inches. So I'm pulling about 7 inches or so there. Fold it over. If you're working with like a really long strand, if you went for like the 90 inches, pull a lot more down. You can probably pull down 25, 30 inches or so, fold it over, and that'll give you a lot more, a lot less of your arm just going multiple times trying to pull thread through, because at the beginning you'll have a lot going on there with extra length. Okay, and so here's what we're gonna do for, let me make sure my camera focus is good. And I made a discovery the other day with color. Certain colors stand out a little bit better on the white, and blue is definitely one of them. So I'll tighten this up here. Yep. Okay. So we're going to start with doing some ladder stitching. So anyone who's ever done like starting a fringe design, or of course herringbone design, you need a base to build off of. And I'm going to build a base that is eight beads long, basically. And I'm going to treat each of those laddered stitches, I'm going to treat 2 beads as 1 bead. And you guys have probably seen a lot of fringe designs start exactly like this, where you just start to string, 4 seed beads, and you make your square, and then you add them 2 at a time in a ladder. So let me show you what that looks like. And I'm going for 8. That will give me 4 strands, right? Because each column, herringbone columns are these sets of 2, right? And each column is going to give me a strand. If you wanted to have less strands or more strands, add in groupings of 2, add or remove beads. So you can make one that's 6 and you would get 3 strands, or you can make one that has 10 and you could have 5 strands. And something that's cool is you can braid them. And then, that's another idea that you can try if you wanted to add more, so you have enough to do that, or take one away. So think about that when you're building. I'm going to stick with what I've got here with the 8. So I'll have a total of 4 strands. Okay. So let's get 4 beads on the needle. Okay. So there's the 4. Bring that down. And the tail that you need to leave is probably just enough to do your wire guardian. And for the wire guardian, what you'll want to do is you'll weave to the center and add it, and we'll show that at the end. These are the wire guardians I've got here. We'll put those on at the end. For now, we're just going to build that ladder. So there's my 4 beads. Come up through the first 2 that you strung. And the side I'm coming in through is the side the tail is exiting from. So just these 2 here. There we go. And pull tight. And what you'll get is that little box shape that will pop up. And then once you've got that box shape, go down through the next two. So here's my working side, threads on this side. And I'm going to turn and come through this side. So there's that. And then just pick up two more. And this is just a basic ladder stitch. Two more beads. And I'm going to come back through these last two beads, and I'm coming through in the opposite direction of my exiting thread. So on the other side, the side that the thread's not coming out of. And you'll get a little section there added. It's a little wonky in the beginning. Don't worry too much about that if it's moving around, but just try to help it sit sort of side by side as best you can. Mine do tend to move around a lot for this first part. So here's two more. Oh, sorry. Come back up through those last two, and then we add the two more. Forgetting how to ladder stitch, you guys. Okay, and your tail thread's going to be kind of in the way, but just, you know, help it get out of the way. So there's my three. Now I'm going to need two more. Come up through those. All right. So I've got four now, and I got to remember to go through those two. I always forget to do that, especially if I'm moving quick. So there's four. We're going to do four more, just like that. Just remember to come back through those. And so if anyone's seeing what I'm seeing here, you get this kind of like where they're a little warped. We go back through them after this at the end to tighten that up optionally if you feel like you want to. But even as just performing the stitch that we do next, we'll tighten these up as well. You'll see when we get there. So don't worry too much if yours are moving a little bit. Mine are too. See, they're doing that. And you can perform this stitch and create this design with other size seed beads. I used 11 for this design just because I thought that was a nice complement with the size of crystal I was using. But if you were doing something just really, you know, like if you were doing something with larger beads, say like a 10mm, you could build this bib within size 8 seed bead. And you get something a little more symmetrical. There's 7, so here's 8. All right. So I'm just double checking. I've got 8. And that's ladder stitching. So how is everybody feeling about ladder stitch? I'll stop here for just a second to make sure that I didn't lose anyone. And if everyone's doing all right with ladder stitch, I'll keep going for the next part. Seems like everyone's all right. So yeah, all right. So you've got your 8 ladder stitched on there. Now we're just going to start doing herringbone stitch. And so a herringbone stitch is performed where you pick up 2 more beads, but this time we're going to go down through the last 2 beads in our row. And for when you're building into your ladder, I just go through both beads. In subsequent rows with herringbone, you'll be going through just the 1 bead in the row before it. But in that laddered row, we're going to go through both of the beads just because it's easier. And it's an opportunity to tighten up this stuff that we got going on here. So coming down this way. And up. And what I did there was I came up through the next 2 beads. And I'm going to pick up 2 more and go down through the next two. And every time you do that, those two new beads are going to sit, you can help them a little bit, but they should sit kind of side by side like that, just next to each other. And that's our first row of herringbone. I think that's where the name comes from too, is because they do kind of, they slant inward toward each other. And then that's where the, I guess where the look and the name come from. But here I'm going up through the next two beads in our section here. And let's get two more. And down through the next two here. And see how it's doing such a good job tightening up the row we had, our little laddered row that didn't look amazing at first, and now it's just starting to look so much better. And so coming up through these next two. And I wanted to just take 1 minute to talk about our tail thread. So a couple things about the tail thread that I've thought of since writing the PDF. You could make this tail thread extra long and it could become one of the strands at the end. Or at this point, because we are going to need to add that wire guardian at the end. And so we're going to need some thread at this end to do that. Before going any further, if your tail thread is exiting from the top, which it will be if you're doing 8, or any even count for that matter, go ahead and try to bring it down through. It may not work. You may have to get your needle on there. We can try to get it out of the way at this step. And I didn't flatten my ends. Let me grab my pliers there. This is just optional, and it just makes it a little easier to keep going because it's going to start getting in our way as we stitch. So we'll just grab a needle here. And again, this is optional. It's just the tail thread has been kind of just getting into my field of view. So I'm going to bring it down this way. I put a needle on it because it just couldn't get it through without a needle. Sometimes I can, but it's pretty thick stitching going on here. Okay, and I'm just going to leave it for now. Later, we'll take this tail thread and we'll move over here and put our wire guardian on with it. But for now, I'm just getting it to the bottom there. And there's that. Okay, so we're almost to the end of our row, of our first row of herringbone. So I'm going to pick up 2 more beads. And I'm going to come down through these 2. And those are the last 2 in the row there. And that always just looks so cute to me. They look like little flowers or little cactus. They just kind of, the way that they sit there, it's kind of neat. And so now I'm going to just talk really quick about a question that I got emailed about the thread. So with herringbone stitch, you can do a turn that makes it so your thread doesn't show on the side. Let me show you what I mean. And I'll explain why I didn't do it. You can see my thread there. Only, no one's really going to notice it. No one's going to look that close. But I prefer to do my herringbone that way. Often I'll embellish it with another bead, but if I just want it to be flat and simple, the reason I do that is the herringbone turn that you can do, which is coming up through. I'll show you how to do it in a second, but when you do the herringbone turn, it'll warp the ends on these sides and it'll kind of give you a curl. It's just kind of hard to get the tension right when you do that turn. It makes my sides a different height than my center when I do the turn. So this is style. And honestly, someone with a different hand might get a different result and they may prefer doing that herringbone turn their way. So I would say try both. I'll show you both and try both and then decide which one you like and go for it. But truth be told, I actually let my thread show on the side. And I recently, I bought a pattern from another designer and I saw that she does this with her brick stitch. And I've looked at her work for, I don't know, years, and I've never seen her threads. But there it was in the instructions, her threads visible right on the side of her brick stitch. And I had no clue. And the work is beautiful. So total style, up to you. I invite you to try it. So what I like to do from here is just go ahead and come up through the bead above. So again, I'm exiting from this bead down here. And I like to just jump up like this. And it also makes my bottom real flat, which I really like the look of that too. I don't mind seeing my thread. And you could even switch to like a colored thread. I know that at Michael's, they have blue Wildfire. So you could switch to blue Wildfire. I didn't do that here because I want you guys to be able to see what I'm doing. But what I might do if I was going to make this, you know, for like a show or something is use the blue, match my color. And there's also green and there's gray, I believe. And now there's pink and beige that you can order online from Michael's. So many colors you can go for. Let me show you the turn. I'm going to back out. So from here, if you didn't want your thread to show on the side, you could come up through the next ones, these, and then pull through and jump up through this bead. So you're doing a little hop there. And you know what? That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. It will do two things to your stitching. It will make these two beads sit tightly on top of one another, and you lose the herringbone look on that side. So you don't get the little, you know, V shape that all the other beads are going to have. And over time, over a long bracelet, like if you did a whole bracelet, the flow of your bracelet would be tight on the edge, loose in the center, and it would curl. At least that's been my experience. So, I mean, take it or leave it. If you like that, totally do that. No thread showing on the side. Really good thing to do. I just think that it's a style. So hopefully that answers your question. If I think I saw you in the chat there. I think I saw Pat there. It was Pat's question. So I'm going to go ahead and keep building some rows. Let's build a few rows and then I'll show you guys adding strands. And then we'll go from there. So starting my next row, I picked up 2 of the beads, come down. And then notice I didn't go through 2 beads. I just went through the 1 bead in my next column. So I went down through the bead below and then turned and came up through that bead. So let's do that a few more times. So there's these 2. Sometimes I have to help them a little bit. It's good to help them now or you'll get some thread gaps as you go. So down through that bead and then up through the adjacent. There's 2 more. So down through that bead, the one that was just below it, and up through the next one here. And what I'm going to do on this side, so pretend that on this side I left it how I had it originally, and you could see my thread on that side. I'm going to go down through all these beads, and this is just because I'm stylistically matching. I'm putting see the starter thread here. I'm matching it so that they're both starting on the same ones. And as I go through on one side, I'm going to step down 1 more so that they're on the same row, the turns. That's just, I do that not necessarily because of the thread on the side being visible. I do it more for structure because it changes the tension a little bit for me in a way that might be imperceptible or might not. But it's just a little tip I thought I'd share. I honestly don't know why I like doing it that way. I just feel like when I've done my pieces that way, they flow. And then it's more noticeable on a long design, like where you've done your whole bracelet and herringbone stitch and you just keep going. And if you've ever held one of those pieces, they can tend to have just, you know, some of them are more flowy than others. There's some secret sauce there that I think I'm struggling with the words for, but I just know it when I see it. So again, just try it and see what you like. And then after you've made a few of these, you'll definitely have a good feeling for what works for your design. There also might be, you know, in my case, a bit of habit, because this is how I learned to do it. And there's a lot of just great memories of that experience of getting to learn the stitch that I might associate with that particular style of turn. So it's a personal choice, I think. And I'm going to come down through. So in this case, it would have been my regular side. So I'm just going to go down through one below. But you could go down to any bead and use any bead to turn. So it really doesn't matter which one you choose, in truth. It's still going to work out. All right, so in the sample designs, I believe I did a total of 7 rows. You can do as many rows as you like. I like the look of 7. And so that's what I did there. So I've got 5, so I'll just do 2 more rows. We'll start building some strands. And then I have another sample where I have the strands done, because the part that takes the longest here, I believe, is actually stringing those strands. So the length that you would like them to be. We'll talk about length as well. Make sure I cover that. And when we get to making the other side, we'll want to keep the other side as the same height of 7 rows. Because we're going to use that height, we're going to measure the height of this one and use it to estimate how long of our strands, you know, how many beads to string in that case. And so one more here. Let's see, what do I do on this side? I'm on. So I'm going to go down the same number here. And just matching what I did on the other side. So my turns are in that same row. And this is my last row, almost done. Almost. Okay, one more. The tail thread's just getting in my way a little bit. Move that out of the way. Okay, last one. And coming up. So now let's start putting some beads on. And I'm going to show you what I did on the sample, but this is truly where you can really make this your own. You can have so many really great designs and just great beads in your stash that you want to use that. And again, what I did was I used a bunch of these. So I'm just going to grab a bunch of scissors here. I hid them from myself. There we go. I kind of use the 4mm Bicone as a spacer in a way between my larger Bicones. So I'm going to start with just one strand there, and then let's go with, this one stands out the most from my blue, so we'll go with this color here. All right. All those beautiful beads. They're so gorgeous. I don't think this is the AB one. Yeah, that's just a regular topaz. It's so pretty though. All right, so here's what I did for stringing. I did a 4mm and 11/0. And then I did a 6mm, 11/0, 4mm, and I just kept going. Just like that. Just because I thought it looked cool and for no other reason. So that's definitely something you can change up if you want to. And so for how many to string, you're probably thinking, oh gosh, how many should I do here? What I did to figure out my measurement was I determined how long I wanted my bracelet to be. And then I added just a little bit, not a lot, but because this is a kind of a wide design, I put a little bit of a 1/4 inch over what I would normally make a bracelet for myself, only because it's got, again, it's got to have some height on your wrist, right? And then when you want to clasp it, you'll have a lot of extra wiggle room if you put like a lobster claw with jump rings and stuff. And I often will weight my jump rings or my chain with something at the end to make it easier to put on. Just another little design tip there. But for length, think about when you get to this other end, move this up a little bit, we're going to be adding length at the end. We're going to add as much length as we've got here. So if you've got your piece in front of you, just grab a tape measure or a ruler or something like that that you can use to measure. And then just take a look out how big it is. I kind of went for 1/2 inch. That's why I went with 7, because I remember more rounded numbers easier. But so about 1/2 inch, if you're using a size 11 seed bead and you did 7 rows, that's what you'll have. So 1/2 inch here, 1/2 inch at the end. And then I'm going to add another 1/2 inch because I know my lobster claw is going to stick out depending on the size lobster claw you're using. You can be adding as much as 1 inch in length. So we could say, make this strand 2 inches less than your desired length. And that might be a good estimate. Or you could even add, make it 2 1/4, just whatever makes it more comfortable. If you're making it adjustable, you can stick with the 2 because you know you'll have some wiggle room here with your jump rings. If you're using a toggle, maybe go ahead and add that extra 1/4 to 1/2 inch or so. So you've got some wiggle room there. But so yeah, in my case, I'm going to make this 2 inches less than my desired length, the strung part. So the part where I'm putting beads on. And I'll just keep going here. So this part takes a really long time. And I won't go the full length. I'm just going to go one more here. I ended with a 4mm Bicone. Started with a 4mm and ended with it. All right, pick up 2 seed beads and come back down through the Bicone. Leave those 2 seed beads hanging out on top. Those are going to become herringbone stitches. And I use the fringe trick actually to pull this down. I'll wait till I get to the bottom here, but just going back through all the beads. And I'm going to get to the bottom of my Bicone here. And we'll make that tight. And so from your Bicone, we're exiting from the bead that's right here on the side, right? Our edgemost 11-0. We want to go through the next 11-0. So come down through that bead. And again, I'm going to give it a little bit of adjustment. When the strand is longer, I'll show you on my other piece that's further along that the strand gets longer. This is a little even more trickier to do, but if you can, try to help those 2 beads sit like, you know, a good herringbone row, to sit like a little side by side on top. If you can get them to do that, it's going to save you a step later and it might make your strands tighter. But having said that, don't worry too much about tension because we end up reinforcing the edge strands a lot, especially the sides, because we have to use them to travel later. But so you're down through this bead here, right? And now come up to the next one, just like you're doing herringbone, and start stringing your next one. And so we're at the halfway mark in class, and the stringing part is the part that takes the longest. So what I did is I have one that I did earlier, and I strung all of my strands up and down, and then came up, would string another one, put 2 extra beads, come back down, going through the next one here, and then you would come back up through this side, string another strand again, then you'd be down through here and up through here. And that's where I am on this one. So I'm going to move this one aside really quick. Just plug it in over there. And I'm going to bring up this one. And that is all that I've done here. Is everything I just showed you just fast forwarded super fast. So just up and down, all those. And here we are, we're exiting from the last one on this side. I strung all these beads and I'm actually short too. And I knew I had them up here. So I thought I'll come upstairs and grab two more. I was working on this and I usually work downstairs on my dining room table. It's got really good light down there too. So here's, I just need these two. I need two more of those. Okay, so another crystal, just matching what I did before. All right. And I really like the look of this single colorway. That was another thought that I had, was I wanted the opportunity to show you guys just one that's just one solid color. You would need to buy 2 packs like this, but it would be exactly enough if you're doing 4 strands. And yeah, just gorgeous. And I always count my beads, and that's another reason I went with symmetrical. This gets exponentially harder when you're changing the beads in your strands. But just to talk about measuring really quick, I've had it happen more than once where I get to the end and even using the same number of beads, I end up with a different height. If your height's different by like that much, don't worry about it. It's fine. That's going to work. If your height's really far off, when we do this next step, it's going to cause it to kind of do that. Or it'll cause all of your other strands to be too short. So think about height when you're finishing each one. Level this side out and then just look at it and just make sure you're feeling like it's, you know, close enough. And it's especially hard if you're doing different bead sizes, you know, it can be tricky, but definitely play with it. And it can be done. It absolutely can be. It's just a little trickier. But so here's my two size 11 beads. I'm going to come all the way down through all these on the side, just like we did before. It's going to be a little longer, but I wanted you to see a full strand length because it is a little trickier. And I'm just being careful not to miss one. If you miss one, then, I mean, I think you'll notice right away, but if you don't, it's kind of hard to fix later. So maybe just after every strand, just give it a quick check and see. Just like with fringe, you know, the heartbreak of a fringe earring where you've gone through all that and then you're like, oh, I missed one. And I'm also not worrying about how loose it is just yet, because we get to do that little trick at the end where it tightens up. I'm just getting through them. All right. So exiting from this bead here, I'm going to go down through this one. And now I'm going to fix my tension. So to do that, let's just get all this stuff out of the way here. Just like on a fringe design. So I'm pulling on this side and I'm pinching these and I'm just going to get them to where they're almost touching, which is using my thumbnail as a gap. And then kind of pressing here, pulling with this side over here. Help those sit side by side. And there we go. So now our strands are done. And now the fun part, we're going to travel back up and join those. You can do a turn here and just go right back up this strand. If you are, this is your opportunity to fix another one. If you want to fix another one, you can travel back up and down and fix it and go up this side if you want. It doesn't matter which side you go up. I'm going to head up this side. And I'm going to just travel down here. In the handout, I show a trick for doing a turn that matches one of your existing thread jumps on the side, if that's something that interests you, of having them on top of each other. So that's what I'm doing here. I travel down a few beads so I can do my turn where I already have some thread showing. You see, I've got just little doubles there, but it really doesn't matter where you do that turn. You do it anywhere. All right, let's travel up this strand. It's going to take a minute, but we'll just keep going. And I am going to need to add thread, and I did that on purpose. I want to show you adding thread. Because I definitely don't have enough here left on this particular strand to do an entire herringbone bib for the top. So we'll be adding a thread up there. I wish there was a faster way to show this, but it because I feel like it takes a long time, but it's definitely not as long as it seems probably. Let's keep going. Okay, when you get to the top, just pick a side, any side. Only go through one of those seed beads. I'm going to go through this one because it's standing up a little funny. And there you go. So we need 2 more seed beads. And this part is the fun part. So, and you know, I'm going to go really slow because this is the kind of the magic part of the whole thing. So I'm going to go a little slow. But what I've done here is I've laid the design out. I've got them, so I know which strand is next, right? So lay those down. But hint, this is how you can do a braid. If you wanted to do a braid, you could join ones that aren't next, right? Just, you know, to think about. Do it this way first, try it a few times, and then your brain will naturally go there. I'm going to go and just start making a herringbone stitch, just normal. I picked up 2 beads, right? Got 2 beads on there. And I come down through this next one. And this is all diagrammed in the handout to you, so you don't have to memorize this. It's there. Here's my next strand. So I did the herringbone little thing there. It's like a single column one. And I've got my next strand. Come up through one of those beads on the next side. Oops, sorry about that. And when you do that, here's what's going to happen. It's going to be next to, it's kind of like, you know, when we did the herringbone down there and you come up there through the next one, we're just doing the same thing where you would step up and then you would start building the next one, but we have one extra problem. We need to join. We need to join these. So pick up one more seed bead. And then just come down. And then back up. And through that bead that we just added. So in a way, this is a little bit like ladder stitching. You could compare it to ladder stitching if you want to think about how it's being done. And so here's the next one. How's everyone feeling about this? I know it's a little, I can bring the handout out also, just to show what I did. So we see we have 2 joined now. I'm going to bring that out just to make sure. I don't want to lose anybody. I get worried. So what we did here, see, we added 2, and then we came down through it. We came up through the one adjacent. We added a new bead, and then we came back down through these 2. And then you're going to come over here and go back up, down, and around. We're just going to repeat that same thing all the way to the end. So you get to see it a few more times. We're going to repeat it for all 4 strands to join them. And it'll make sense. Like while you're working, when you're sitting there at your desk looking at that, just refer to the handout a couple times and you'll totally have it. So here we are. We're going to join the next strand. We're exiting from the bottom here, that bead. And here's the next strand. Come up through that one. And it'll kind of bring them to sit. They're going to be sitting side by side like that, right? Pick up another bead. And go back down through both of those last 2 there. And I want to make sure and say this is not the only way to do this. You could build another bib and then just stitch into it, like if you had the other bib built already. When I'm saying bib, I'm referring to that little square that we made of herringbone. So that's another way you could do it. This is just faster. So down through these 2, and then back up through those. So there's kind of an exaggerated, spaced out version. It's ladder stitch, really. That's all it really is. Ladder stitch where we're adding a bead. And then we need to finish that side of that herringbone stitch. So I picked up one more, size 11, brought it down. So we just have to add our 4th strand now. To do that, I'm just gonna bring that strand over. And it really doesn't matter which side you pick, they're gonna spin, so no worries there. Pick up one more size 11 bead. My beads are jumping off my needle. There we go. And then back down through the last 2. And then up through both of those. And it's super wonky and loose right until this spot. And then it's like, boom. And it's perfect. It's tight. Got one more. And there we go. How's everyone feeling about that? I'm just gonna bring the handout out one more time to kind of explain what we did there.
You're good, Danielle.
Is it good? Everyone's, wow, you guys are good. Okay, so yeah, that's all we did. So here's where we are right now. We just came down through these 2. And so a couple things you can do. In the handout, I show going all the way back down the other side and doing a turn. I did that just because I went up this side, right? We have 2 passes through this one, and I was just thinking the sides are where you're going to have the most force. And so great opportunity to reinforce. It would take a long time for me to show that, but that is what I did on the actual designs, is I stitched all the way back down through here. And I did a turn down here. And then I stitched all the way back up. And I made sure to be exiting from this side right here. So let's pretend I did all that, because that will take quite a while to show, just traveling down, doing a turn here, and traveling up. You can also just do your regular herringbone turn right here. Or if you're doing the hidden turn, you just come up through that bead and then come up through that bead. So all those things are going to work out just great. So let's make the rest of this herringbone bib, and then let's get those wire guardians on. Another thing that I did for building the first row of herringbone off of a laddered segment, which essentially is what we've got here. Again, you're going down through both of the beads instead of just the bead in the last row. And I did that also just to add one more little stability strength add to this section here, right? Come up. And it seems like, so I started with 90 inches when I made this design. It seems like I'm actually going to make it through my bib on one strand, which I'm surprised, probably because I didn't reinforce the side. If I had reinforced that side, I would definitely need to add. But I'm thinking we will show that anyway, just because I know a lot of you guys will want to see that, especially if you do a really big one. You could do these with like 8 strands if you want. You'll definitely be adding for that. So there's one row of herringbone all set. Let's turn. Let's build another row on this one. Oops, I made a mistake, guys. I'm gonna head back and fix it. See, I missed a bead there. And it's so pretty. I want it to look right. So looks like I just didn't make it through that bead. There we go. Okay. And there's that one. All right, let's make a few more rows and then we'll weave in a new strand. Or it's actually, we're getting pretty tight. I might go a little over showing weaving in. Carmen, do you think that'd be all right? It's kind of a big class. Lots of content for this one.
It's okay, Danielle.
Okay, yeah, it'll take just a few minutes. It's the same thing you guys have seen me do a lot, but sometimes it helps to see it in this specific design that you'd be doing. So if I had to add thread for this, what I would want to do is I'd want to end a row because the end rows are secure because you've done that turn, the step up. Otherwise, you know, they're kind of loose, right? They're moving around. And so I would want to add thread in a spot where I can leave my old strand hanging without it coming undone. So there's my old strand. I'm just going to leave it in place. I'm not going to cut it. Grab a new one. And you could do this at the bottom too. So if you found yourself out down here after having traveled down, same process. You just leave it in place wherever it was that you left off. And get a new strand. Bring that on. Okay. I'm not going to make it super long. I'm just going to cut a little bit here, but whatever length you add. For adding into herringbone, I always try to come down in through, you know, the opposite side and then just weave through a couple times. So I'm just going to follow my thread path, really. Same thing we do on a lot of our designs. So I just did a little step up and that gives you a nice little locked spot, right? There is one thing you could do if you are somebody who likes to knot. So you see I brought in my strand through an edge and then I did a step up turn. You could take these two right now and knot them if you want. Just know that if you ever have to come back through this bead, which we will when we add our next row, you'll have a knot blocking you. So I don't knot here, I just leave it. But if you want to put a knot there, I mean, you can get around the knot, especially if you're using a bigger bead. Like if you're using an 8/0, no problem, you can do it then. But yeah, so look, I'm going to build a new row from there. And this process acts like weaving in, but I'm going to do something else with this thread when I'm done. So I'll show you that too. I feel like weaving in a herringbone is so much faster than like peyote or and you could also just weave through these without adding the new beads too. You know, either way would work. But so here I'm going to come down through one more bead just to match. I'm just matching in the step up spot, right? And there we go. Now I've met my old thread. I could knot here if I wanted. So let's just keep going. We'll build back. I would probably build 3 more rows and then weave my old thread up into it. And then at the end, take that little bit of tail thread that's left here and just pull it up through the rest of the beads and then trim it. Super easy. And alternatively, what a lot of people do is they just start weaving into the strand without adding new beads, and that also is good. But I haven't had any problems doing it this way, and it saves you a little bit of a step because, you know, you get a row built with your weave in. I'm just speeding up a little bit now. Okay, let's see where we are in terms of height. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's do one more and throw that wire guardian on and we're good. Oops, I only picked up one bead there. When I start going faster, I tend to do that a little bit. There we go. Go down through one, inside here. Okay, so when you put the wire guardian on, there's a cool trick I want to show you really quick for that, and then we're all set. I'm not going to weave in my old strand. I think, unless anyone really wants to see it, I feel like that's something you guys have all seen. This old one hanging here. All I'm going to do is bring it up into the new rows and just weave it in. Okay. So again, this one I would bring up, I'll put a needle on it later, bring it up, trim it. This old working strand, I would bring it up into the next row above and just kind of weave over and then do another weave back and then trim it. So pretend those aren't there, pretend we wove those in. And let's do our wire guardian. So I'm going to weave to the center. And for the center for us, our center is straddling the second and third strands or columns. So you want to come down and up, go down through the next one here. And then up. Okay, and now we just need our wire guardian. So I'm gonna grab that really quick. I use some of my old findings packs as ways to store my other findings. A little tip for you guys. And if you've never used wire guardian, you have to get your needle through one. Each of these sides has a hole, and then there's an open well on the top. And so what you want to do is get your needle through the one side, bring that down, and you want to go over the top of it and through the hole on the other side. And I like to pinch these in between my thumb and my forefinger just to kind of keep the thread in the well. And here's where we're going to head. We're going to head right back into this bead. And let's reinforce it. Let's go down one more bead. And every time I reinforce it, I'm going to go down an extra row. There's one. And let's come up. Making sure I actually make it through that circle. Wire guardians can be a little tight. Feel free to use your chain nose pliers to help you get through it. And now I'm going to head down through like 3 beads below if I can do it in one swoop. Definitely going to need an assist here. Again, I'm just pinching these to keep that thread in the well. And if everything looks good, I'm going to go ahead and head over here. And so one little thing you can do if you want is you can join the ends. So you see how there's a gap here and I have no gap over here. Well, I want to get back up and fix that. So you can turn through here. And keeping in mind, I'm just trying to maintain my symmetry. So I am going to go down through this side. Come up. And now I'm going to fix those. I'm going to connect that. One of the things with herringbone is being headed in the right direction, right? So there we go. And I'm going to dodge my wire guardian and come down through here. Next one maybe. And now we're just weaving in. And so weaving in, all we do to weave in is just kind of following that existing thread path. I'm going to go down one more, maybe one more below that, since I have a lot of thickness going on there. but that's pretty much it. The cool thing about herringbone is you have so much real estate to turn. And as long as you stick with the convention of, following that same weaving in, that we do usually, where you bring the old one up and the new one through, you'll have a pretty evenly tensioned piece here. And the weaving in makes it stronger. Other things you can do is you can weave down through your strands, and you can get back over here and use some of this. And on this side, you would just use your tail thread to do the same thing we did before, weaving to the center too, and attach your wire guardian on that side. Same process there. And then you'll just put your chain and your lobster claw one side, chain on the other, or make a chain with some jump rings. And yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. It's a lot to cover, but it's a really beautiful piece, and it takes some time to make it, but it's a really cool way to use up beads, and also really fun just to do something different, right? Does anyone have any questions for me? It's so quiet. I feel like I went really fast, so no worries if you have questions. Yeah, those I'm seeing some. I'm grabbing the chat here. This is great class. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Beth. Was there a question there? I think I missed it. Let me bring that back.
Hey, Danielle, I was just going to tell you, this is definitely a high-end piece that you've made. It's clearly, we all know it's gorgeous and beautiful. You have said in the past you've made pieces like this for when you were doing shows. Could you just give everyone a sense of how long does it take you to make one when you're on a roll, and what did you charge?
Yeah, so making one can take you several hours, especially if you're new to the stitch. And I can probably make one in about an hour and 20 minutes or so. The longest part, of course, is doing the stringing and then coming back down and doing all the weaving. And if I'm going to sell a piece, I might take the time to reinforce every single strand instead of just the outer two. But reinforcing just the outer two for ones that I've worn myself have always been fine. So kind of up to you. But yeah, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours tops. And then depending on what I used in my beads, that's going to really change the price a lot. So if you're using Czech crystal, you're making $100 bracelet right now. If you're using some other beads that you had in your stash, some Czech glass beads, or maybe some little pearls, you're going to want to roll that up through your pricing model based on your material cost, which for a lot of people is anywhere from 3 to 7 times, depending how they roll up their time, right? If they have I used to use my material cost as my only basis, but that kind of has a lot of problems when you start using really expensive stuff. So you have to kind of gauge it based on, okay, what is the market value of what I'm producing? What is the kind of margin I can get on that bead? Pricing's complicated. So, but definitely, yeah, if you're using what I'm using here off the cuff, we're looking at $100 minimum, maybe a little more. So
you would definitely sell for $100.
I would, yeah.
That's good to know.
I mean, you've got $30 in materials here, probably, roughly. So yeah, you definitely want to roll that up. Yeah. So, and then of course your time is valuable. It's the most valuable thing we all have to offer this world, right? So your time is worth something. Definitely count that in there. And yeah, so these bracelets are so cool. And if you want to look at more ways to make some really high-end jewelry line for your shows or for gifts, we're doing a really cool class not next week, but the week after that. I just want to pop these earrings off and then show you these other ones that who doesn't love fringe? Fringe is so in right now. Like everywhere is fringe. And I really got caught up in it myself. And so I started making a bunch of these very beautiful, flowy, and then when you put the crystal on there, it just makes it like, wow. And when you're wearing these, you just feel like super goddess, because there's so much sparkle in the sunlight. Now all I need is a cruise ship and I've got it made, right? So it's so cool. And I made one with delicas and rounds, and then I made one with Czech and bicones. So we'll do that for we'll do this for our workshop class, not next week, but the week after that. I believe that is the 27th, May 27th. So please sign up for that if you're free that day. It'll be great to spend that time with you. All right. So I want to just take a quick look at the gallery, say hi to everyone, and I'll let you guys go because I know I went over. Thanks for sticking with me. That was a big one. So yeah, and get my earrings back here. I'll see you guys. I will see you guys next on the 27th, Friday after next. So happy beading, happy creativity. Have a great weekend. Bye.